Breaking news, the New York Times dropping a new bombshell that Michael Cohen, President Trump's longtime attorney and so-called fixer, could be charged by the end of this month. Now, these charges could deal a major blow to the president because Cohen has said, both publicly and privately, that he would be willing to tell prosecutors what he knows in exchange for leniency. CNN Money and politics correspondent Christina Alessi is following this breaking news. Christina, what more can you tell us?
That's right, Anna. You've identified a big piece of new information the Times is reporting tonight, which our prosecutors are close to bringing charges, possibly by the end of August. The other piece of new information the Times is reporting tonight is that prosecutors have specifically identified over $20 million in loans that Michael Cohen's taxi business got from various lenders, and whether he misrepresented the value of his assets to get those loans, which is specifically bank fraud. And also, in addition to bank fraud, they're also looking at tax fraud charges. Now, just to put some context on this, the bank and tax fraud allegations, those have been circling around Cohen since the FBI raided his home and office. My colleagues at CNN have been reporting on those details. Since at least April, we've known that prosecutors were interested in Cohen's taxi medallion business. We also knew that prosecutors were looking at Cohen's lenders. The New York Times, in tonight's story, names two of them, Sterling National Bank and Melrose Credit Union. They happen to be lenders who work with taxi medallion businesses. And CNN also reported that prosecutors had subpoenaed Michael Cohen's accountant. Now, what we're going to see probably over the next couple of days is both the administration and the Trump organization where Michael Cohen worked, they're probably going to try and distance themselves from Michael Cohen and from these charges. The Trump organization is going to say that, you know, they knew nothing about Michael Cohen's taxi business and that it didn't have anything to do with the president's business. And it's going to be harder for the White House, however, to distance itself from Michael Cohen if prosecutors go ahead and move forward with the other charges, which are connected to, you know, silencing women who had alleged affairs with the president.
All right, Christina Alessi, thank you for bringing us that report. Let's bring back our attorneys to get their reaction. Jim Schultz, Randy Zellin. Jim, I'll start with you. Is this a problem for the president?
Well, I think it remains to be seen, but again, you have to remember there has to be a there as it relates to what Michael Cohen knew, the discussions he had with the president, what he was, you know, what dealings he had with the president, and how it relates back to the Mueller investigation. So, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns here. I'm sure Mueller knows a lot more than the rest of us, but also remember the case that's being looked at this point is in the Southern District of New York. It's not part of the Mueller investigation. They moved it to the Southern District of New York's U.S. Attorney's Office, and the U.S. Attorney there is handling, the U.S. Attorney's Office there is handling that matter. So, I mean, right now it looks like they're looking at Cohen and Cohen alone. As to whether he has anything to say about the president that could help him down the road, that remains to be seen. But we just don't know is the answer to that question.
Right. Randy, Jim points out that this is the Southern District of New York, separate from the special counsel investigation. But we know nothing happens in a vacuum. And Cohen has expressed a desire to cooperate, to tell all, to hopefully help his own family, his own fate. Do you see this as a problem for the president?
Not necessarily, and really for two reasons. And you bring up a great point. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Well, whenever you're making a decision to cooperate, and cooperation is one of the most extraordinarily painful thing that a human being can go through, because you actually become, the government says jump, you say how high. For everything. You don't get to pick and choose about what you're going to talk about. You don't get to pick and choose where your money is and where your life is at. That's it. Everything gets opened up. So one of the first things that you do with a client is you say, okay, let's look at everything here. With bank fraud, if that's what Mr. Cohen is actually looking at, 20 million sounds scary, but everything is about the sentencing guidelines. His sentencing guidelines probably come out to around 5 years on his possibly worst day. So you do say to yourself, if my worst exposure is around 5 years, I've never been in trouble before, I'm a family man, Maybe we get rid of all of the cloud of the politicalization, whatever you call it.
Politicization.
And you're in the right place, because oftentimes in the Southern District, in the Second Circuit, forget about the craziness of the fraud guidelines. The sentence has to make sense. It's supposed to be sufficient, not greater than.
Right.
He could be walking out with 2 years, 18 months, 2.5 years. And I'm not saying that I'd be happy doing that.
Right.
But is it worth destroying everything to get a better deal when I could be walking out of this quickly and go home after 2 years?